you get one shot. There's the cameras, everything's bigger, the lights, the audience. I brought like massive groups of friends and family because they allow us to bring them on set. And I just wanted to kind of bring as many as I could. And I brought a lot of students too, actually, to help kind of amplify their story.
Mm.
And so there's just like this crazy amount of pressure at the start. And this past season, I was actually the first runner to go. So I didn't even get to see anybody else do the course. I was the guinea pig for everything.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Tech Pathways, the podcast where we bring you the stories of game changers shaping the future of tech, innovation, and everything in between. I'm Jose Gaona, President and CEO of Zeta, and your host. Today we've got someone who's taken STEM education to a whole new level. He's a mechanical engineer, an entrepreneur, a TV personality, and did I mention he's a real-life American Ninja Warrior? He's used his platform to make science exciting, and if you're not already following his work, you're definitely going to want to follow him after this conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Jay Flores. Hey Jay, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation and to connect with your STEM audience.
Yeah. I was saying this before we started, but I'm really excited to have this conversation because there's so many layers to it, right? Obviously, I'm just excited to get to talk to you more about some of your work, but there's so much to learn from there, right? Like we had a whole conversation a couple weeks ago, actually at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, where we sat down in like a tent as a part of like this activation, which was really cool. But we had a whole conversation about, right, like the need to highlight STEM for young kids. And there's so many intersections there from like how are we preparing the next generation of youth here from all backgrounds to take on jobs that tech industry is flagging are going to be facing shortages. But also like the conversation on how do we just make this an exciting space for children, right? For youth to know like there are really, really cool things within the STEM space that they can learn about that maybe are a little unconventional, but that is really shaping the future, right, for us and the opportunities that then as a generation we're building out. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I'll try not to nerd out too much. But it's great to have you. Especially considering that you're all over the country constantly. Like you're always traveling, engaging with community. Like this is the best. Thank you.
I feel like the fact that we met in that tent of all places is kind of a cool connection to, yeah,
Yeah.
wherever we are trying to make an impact. And we ended
Yeah.
up having that conversation in a tent in Austin.
Yeah, in a tent in a convention center in Austin, as a part of a really cool activation that the Stanford Design School and the Siegel Family Endowment were actually doing at South by Southwest. Just a small shout out to our friends over there. Um, I want to start the conversation, Jay, by talking about early inspiration in leadership. So I know some of this background of yours, but I want folks, to also kind of get an understanding of your inspirations and where you come from. So the first question I have is, you've always had this natural curiosity and a love for STEM. Can you share a moment in your childhood where you first realized, or you realized very, intentionally, that you wanted to pursue STEM? Is there a defining moment for you?
Yeah, so for me, it actually came a lot later, but I like that you started with the word curiosity versus like when you knew you were a scientist or an engineer, right? Because I think it stems from that initial curiosity and creativity that I think all children have. And
Mhm.
so I didn't notice this at the moment, but I look back at some old pictures of me as a child, and you could tell I was just so curious. I was always playing with things, I was always trying to figure out how they worked, I was always building things, and not in the sense of like I was some kind of genius that knew how to create these amazing things. It was literally just me rearranging the couch and calling it my airplane design, right? Like taking the couch cushions apart and making an airplane out of it and sharing that with my parents or my sister, right? So early on, that was very noticeable, but I probably myself didn't understand that that was STEM and that was engineering. It was just I had these fun and safe ways that I like to explore. But when I actually kind of like had the switch flipped, um, is kind of funny story. I was in an engineering summer camp, but I still didn't really understand what I was doing, why I was an engineer, and all the connections between my curiosities and my interests to like the real STEM world. The reason why I was in that camp is because teachers continued to tell me, like, hey, you're doing well in math, you're doing well in science, you should consider engineering. And so, first of all, shout out to all the teachers out there that plant that seed of positivity, no matter what it is in students, whether that's STEM or art or whatever you see, like that. Those simple sentences can have a very significant impact on kids, because when it was time for me to check the box for which type of experience I wanted, I chose the engineering. And that's what got me into that engineering summer camp, even though I still didn't know what I was doing. But the moment that the flip switched for me was, we were, as a group of students that were in this camp, we were doing like a ropes course that was supposed to be more of like a team building and leadership experience. And one of the challenges we had to do on this ropes course is that they had this picture, like a massive teeter totter where you could fit like 15 kids on it. And we're all sitting around. And the idea was that we had to orient ourselves in a way where we could balance the teeter totter and then hand over this beanie baby from one end and then like pass it along the teeter totter, pass it along amongst each other till we got it to the other end of the teeter totter, and neither end could touch the floor in that process. So we're just kind of like designing and figuring problems out and trying to figure out how we balance this. And the funny part is that once I received that beanie baby, like once they handed it to me, I was like, oh, this is what engineering is. You just like try to solve a problem and you get to decide what types of problems you want to solve. In this case, we're solving a very silly problem that doesn't really have any impact on the world. I mean, in the case of my life, it had an impact on helping me understand where I should go after. But it just showed me that it's about gathering the skills that you need to make the changes you want to see in the world. And in that moment is when I realized, like, okay, this is a good path for me to take if I want to make an impact. And I just need to decide what type of engineering and what field and what industry and how I want to make my impact long term. And so it was that beanie baby on the teeter totter, man.
Yeah. That's such a crazy story, it, to me, in part because like we've talked about like what are the narratives that like we have to share with folks in leadership positions, right? Who are making policies that are providing more opportunities like that to our youth to have those aha moments. And like I think so many of our children, all of our children, have the potential to have those moments where they're like, wow, like this is what that is, and it's so cool, and I want to continue to learn in this space. But we're a little behind in the way that we provide all children with like those kinds of opportunities, right? And everyone should have opportunities like that. I'm trying to think if like I have a moment like that as a kid. Um, I was actually really interested like in the sciences as a kid, and for a while I thought I was gonna like go into like medicine or something. Um, but I think one of my core memories as like a kid was actually doing a summer camp at UC Santa Cruz. Shout out UC Santa Cruz, uh, which I was like totally not prepared for. Like I remember showing up as like I think it was like a freshman in high school, like had just taken like I don't know algebra or trig, and like the students that I was surrounded by were like in calc, which is a whole nother conversation, right? Like how are we providing resources to different communities? But I spent a whole summer like studying astronomy and oceanography, and like looking at like space objects through telescopes and like going out into the Pacific, like from Santa Cruz to like talk about marine life. And that was a moment for me that like really stands out, and I think about it a lot because it was one of those defining moments. Obviously not, I don't think we can like do that for everybody, but there are moments that like we can be more intentional about in curating for all students where we spark their interest, because that's what it is, right? It's a sparked interest. That's what you're talking about. um, you are the first engineer in your family, is that correct?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm not first gen in the sense of my mom got a degree, but it wasn't in engineering. So I'm the first engineer in my family, the first male on the Flores side of the family to go to college. I had some kind of inspiration from my father, who took on, he never got a degree, but he did enter the military, and he did take on a technical role. So I had some guidance from the side of like just watching him. And it was cool because my dad, even though he didn't get a formal education at the college level, he's just like super hands-on smart. And I think that's where I get my entrepreneurial side. It's just kind of like that, figure it out. You don't need the book, right? You like live through your experiences. And then I get the empathy side, working with kids and making an impact on the community, from my mom, who studied psychology, and she was an elementary school psychologist. So I think I ended up, even though I didn't have an engineer that looked like me specifically with a degree and like going through that path, that combination of their lived experiences and their kind of push for education and focusing on the right things really helped me get into this space. And then as I went along that journey, it kind of built me into the STEM entrepreneur,
Um,
TV personality, whatever it is you want to call all the
yeah.
things put
Oh,
together
we're gonna
into
get
one.
into it. We're gonna talk about all that. I think that's a really cool, like, I love that you acknowledge that, like, from your parents, regardless of like the backgrounds or particular like education backgrounds, that there is an inspiration there, right? And I think that's true for a lot of like communities, right? That we have like these like passions or these kind of like personality traits that we inherit from our family members that make us curious, right? Like I like my dad is a fixer. Like he like if he has a problem, like he will like tinker with it himself, right? And I remember like growing up, one of his favorite pastimes was like figuring out how to grow different crops. So like it got weird sometimes, but like we'd have like corn in the front yard, you know, or like tomatoes, chili peppers. Like he just really loved playing around with like growing different food, and he had like the best green thumb ever. I just killed a plant that I kept actually here as a part of the backdrop. So I did not inherit that green thumb, unfortunately. But he's like a tinkerer, right? And I remember like he would like tinker with his own car and like put in like all these new things into his like little old car to like keep it going. And there's a curiosity there that I think we inherit sometimes, that even though like, you know, maybe our parents don't have the titles of an engineer or like a scientist, like there are these traits that we inherit that are important to recognize, because there's like an honor there, right? Like in acknowledging that was handed down to us, which I think is really cool. Um, for like us to acknowledge as leaders in the space. You talked about this already a little bit with like regards to how your parents have been influential in your growth, but what was that journey like for you as the first individual engineer, like in your family? What was that process like for the family, like in your pursuit there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very blessed that even though early on in my childhood we didn't have like everything we had later on in my development, right? So like by the time I was in high school, we were in a very good spot, versus like when my mom was pregnant with me, she was still finishing up her master's degree, and my dad was still trying to figure out like his transition from military to what kind of opportunities he could get in the real world. And it took some time for him to get to like a solid position, but I always had everything I needed from them, in the sense of that safe space to grow, and that spot where I think they really helped develop my confidence and curiosity from a very early age, so that no matter what the real world hit me with, like I was still able to keep pushing forward, and I was still able to believe in myself. And like that curiosity aspect, it goes back to that same example with the couch cushions, right? So the reason I know that story is because my parents recently retired, and we were watching some old VHS tapes that they had when they moved down here to Florida. And there's a video of me making the airplane out of the couch cushions. And most kids would get yelled at for making a mess, for, you know, put that back where it's supposed to be type of mentality. And instead, my dad actually went and he got the camcorder and started recording my experience and asking me questions about my airplane. And he asked me where his airplane was. So I pointed at the recliner in the corner and like we said I was going to design one for him there. And that like kind of celebration of what I was doing, that celebration of my curiosity allowed me to say, hey, like, yeah, I can keep exploring and I can kind of shape the world around me. That as a 3-year old, it doesn't necessarily register as that's what I want to do in the long term, but it allows me to keep exploring, to keep asking questions as I continue to grow and as I get closer and closer to the knowledge and the education and the resources to actually turn that into an engineering degree, right? So I feel like a lot of children um, lose that curiosity and they stop asking questions because
Mm.
whenever they do they get shut down, or they said because I said so, or this is the way it's always been. And I'm very grateful to my parents for allowing me to have that space to explore, and I think it's lived with me. I've kept that inner child, that inner curiosity alive for so long because of that. And then the other thing was just the confidence and like the belief that, hey, I mean, they gave me two options. He was either college or college. And so the fact that no matter, even though there wasn't an engineer in the family, like there was never any like, oh, are you sure? Like that's going to be hard. It was always like, we believe in you. We know you can do it. Even if I don't know, I'd have to ask them, if they actually thought I'd be able to make it or not. Either way, they never put any seeds of doubt in me, and the complete opposite. They always kind of elevated me. And even if they didn't have the exact resources to, tell me exactly what path to take, or the knowledge of like, you should seek an internship, I always had just like that general level of support. And then I
Hmm.
supplemented the rest of it with student organizations and mentors and stuff that I was able to find along the way. But they really set the foundation for everything. So
Yeah.
shout out to my parents.
Yeah, shout out to parents, like to parents that like cultivate that curiosity, and that like inquisitiveness. And I think it's so cool that like you are helping continue to cultivate that within like youth today. Because not everybody has that privilege, right? Of maybe having like a home where like that environment is there. And so for you to like continue to build that out with like these broader communities of youth today is incredible, right? In part because of your personal story, which I think is really cool. And it is that strong foundation, right? Like there's a strong foundation in making sure that we're cultivating curiosity that then sparks these moments, that is so important. Uh, Another question for you, looking at kind of like your youth and some of these moments that really shaped you. In addition to being a stellar student, you also ran cross country and track. You were captain of both, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I ran cross country and track. I was not captain, and I was not that fast. Actually, I have a pretty embarrassing story of like my first race where I like barfed all over my coach's shoes after the race. But like I have a really strong understanding or I guess like I have a like a general rule of thumb, which is that if someone is a runner, an active runner, it says a lot about them and their endurance, physically and mentally. And so I'm really curious to know from your perspective, how did being a young leader like on those teams, and also how did running in general shape your leadership style?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. Um, and again, you don't always realize you're developing it in the moment. It's like when I
Yeah.
look back and understand how big of an impact that had on my life. The funny part is that I originally actually wanted to become a boxer because
Okay.
I'm Puerto Rican and boxing is kind of a big thing in Puerto Rico. I had like a little basement in my gym. I had a punching bag, a speed bag. I would do push-ups every day. I had jump rope and everything. Then one day I told my mom that I wanted to go to the Olympics instead of college, and she shut it down. Like no more boxing. She had all the data and the reports from a
Yeah.
safety perspective that like potential damage to my
Yeah.
brain and health. But then also just, you know, she knew that I had something better in me than that. So again, shout out to my mom. But when I was kind of like figuring out what to do after that, I was like, well, maybe I should just start running, because either way, even if I can go back to boxing, running is really important. So I'll just
Hmm.
start running to stay in shape. And then if she lets me do it again later, then I'll go back to boxing. But I started running and I had no clue, man. My mom's one of her best friends ran a while back, and um, just I thought, okay, let me like mark off a mile marker. I'm going to run out 1 mile and run back. I'm going to do 2 miles a day. And I literally just like sprinted as much as I did it as fast as I could, which is a terrible idea. It's not the way you train. But anyways, and then I went to the tryouts for track. So I was already a sophomore. So I started a little bit late and it was in track. So I'd already missed 2 seasons of cross country and one of track.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
went to the coach and I was like, hey, I'm interested. He's like, okay, we're doing some off-season workouts. Just join us. He's like, do you want to be a sprinter or a distance runner? I was like, I just want to run. I have no idea. I definitely do not have the body of a sprinter. um, I was definitely more set out for distance running.
Hmm.
And so I joined the distance team, and it's something that honestly changed my life. One, because of the relationships that I built with my teammates. Um, Sometimes running, it seems like it's an individual sport, but it absolutely isn't. It's, every person's points count towards the team score, but
Hmm.
also it's like how you handle hard stuff together and literally like just suffering through long distance runs or speed workouts, whatever it may be, like just how you support each other in that process is huge. And then taking on the leadership role is what I think really set me up for success long term in life. And that's because in distance running specifically, it's a huge mental game.
Hmm.
um, the first when you get started, right, you have a little bit of adrenaline, you run out the gates, and then all of a sudden stuff starts to hurt pretty quickly, and you're like, why am I doing this? Maybe I should slow down a little bit. It's okay, I'll run faster next time, blah, blah, blah. There's always in the beginning of a race, there's that seed of doubt that comes in, and you have to make a decision there. Like, am I gonna slow down and make this easy now, but then regret it at the end, right? And have to make excuses about why I didn't do so well? Or am I going to push through this and it sucks, but at least at the end I'll be happy and I'll be in a better spot. And I translated that to everything, to my engineering degree, right? Like perseverance through the hard times
Hmm.
when engineering is a very difficult degree to pursue, but I knew that mentality, right? Like I'm just going to keep pushing forward. It's going to suck for a little bit now, but in the end, it's all going to be worth it. And I'll be that much in that much of a better spot. But then also, then how do you transfer that into other people? So I remember a specific thing about our team. We would go out on runs, and there's two brothers that were like two of my best friends that were on the team, and they would always like we'd just be getting out on like a pretty long run, let's say like a run that's going to take us like an hour, and we'd be a couple blocks away. They'd be like, what time are we in, right? Like like just are we there yet type of question. But we had just started, so they were kind of messing around, and so I developed this response of 42. I would always say 42, and at first they were always confused, and I don't even know if I knew exactly what I was doing in the moment. But what I ended up turning into was that it didn't matter what time we were at in the run, you always had to give your full effort, right? So the clock doesn't matter anymore, right? We'll take splits and when we need to, but in general, when we're doing just our long runs that we're just putting in work, it's always 42. Doesn't matter. You're putting in that effort. And so that number changed into the idea of like full effort. 42 meant full effort. And that's for you and for your team, right? Not just for individuals, but us as a squad working together, putting our 100% in. But in this case, it's called 42. A few years after I graduated from college, I think actually, I went back to visit my high school chemistry teacher, who was also our cross country coach. And he gives me a shirt.
Wait, your chemistry teacher was your cross country coach? Same, same, literally same.
So there's
Um,
something about STEM and
yeah.
running, I think.
And I was actually her TA, which is like for me that was like, oh, there's an interest here and a desire to like maybe go into STEM. and there was that perseverance. That's really cool. Yeah, maybe there's something there for us to look into at some point.
Yeah, we should study
Yeah.
that more often. And actually, a lot of my teammates ended up studying engineering or STEM related degrees. So maybe there should be some more research into that. But anyways, he gives me this shirt and it said 42. It's more than just a number, it's a way of life. So
Mm,
years after I had already left,
mm,
uh, the team was even more successful than we were when I left. And the 42 was still there. So that was kind of like my legacy with that team, that it persisted even after I was gone. And I'm really happy to just understand that that could potentially have been shaping the lives of other students there. And it just all sat with like taking that decision as a leader and as a brother of my teammates, right? To say, hey, we're going to give each other our 100% no matter what.
yeah. Wow. That's really that's beautiful. And I think that is super true. I am really curious to know, like, is there a correlation there between like the running and the chemistry teachers, which I think is really interesting. But there's something really meaningful about running, right? And the community you do build, and there is like there is like an emotional and mental component to running that I think is like internal. But you're right, it is a community effort. Like you are running with your team. You're building that sense of community. You're constantly encouraging each other. And one of the things that I always appreciated about like cross country and track is that nobody was mean to each other, right? Everyone just wanted everybody else to just try their best and work their hardest, and always was encouraging. One particular day comes to mind in track where like I was accidentally signed up for like the hurdles training. And I didn't question it because the coach just kind of like, like pointed over. Um, and I don't know why that was actually. I never figured out like why they had like asked me to do that day. I just thought it was like maybe a creative exercise. And I like remember doing the jump and like splitting the hurdle in half, just like karate chopping it, like kicking it, which was super embarrassing. It was like a really old, like wood, thing, and just like splitting it right down the middle. But like everyone was just so nice about it. And I did not run hurdles ever again. But um, it's just the community, right? It's the supportive community. And it is a good life lesson that sometimes you do have to push through, because there is a misconception maybe around running. Running does get easier the more you run, but it never gets fully easy, right? Like if you're pushing yourself and continuing that growth, you're still having to push through something that's physically challenging. And so I think it is a good exercise in endurance, mental, emotional, physical, which everybody can learn from, who has like the capabilities to go out and run. So I highly recommend that. Maybe there's something there too. We should encourage folks to go out and like do these exercises that are that help us grow in these different facets of life. I have another question for you, Jay. You first started teaching STEM through SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. What was your experience like there? And how did that teaching start for you?
Yeah, it's an awesome story because it's literally kind of why I'm here today in the specific role I am. Um, so I had the I guess the fortune of receiving a scholarship that also included an internship. And so as a freshman in engineering, I was able to complete a summer internship, which is not very common because you usually have to get past first like your general math and general science stuff before you get into more of the engineering courses. And in that internship, I'm young for my grade. So my birthday's in September, but my parents put me in early. So I started kindergarten like at 3 instead of 4, and like college at 17. I turned 18 a couple weeks in, but everything I was doing was like I was a little bit on the younger side. And then especially since I was a freshman in this internship program, my manager to this day still thinks I was a high school intern. Like he swears that I came in as a high school student, not a college student, but I definitely was a freshman in college. But at the end of the internship, he's like, "You did wonderful. I was not expecting you to do much. I thought I was going to have to babysit you all the time. I think you did great. Um, your grades are good. You have an internship experience now. The one thing that's missing on your resume is a leadership experience. So he
Hmm.
challenged me to take on like a formal collegiate leadership experience. I had the track and other experience in leadership prior to as a captain, but he wanted something more like within a student organization, like SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. So I go back to campus. My first year, I was avoiding everything because I thought like I just have to study. I just have to, make sure I get good grades. I also had a girlfriend in back home, so I would go home on the weekends sometimes. That was like my focus. But then that second semester or that second year as a sophomore, I was like, all right, I got to go get a leadership position. I find SHIP, and I was like, do you guys have any roles open? And they had already had elections the semester before, but they had one position open. And it was called presentation chair, which basically meant you had to go to local high schools in the community and talk about engineering. And so it's kind of like planted the seed for everything I do now. Not exactly the same, right? My first presentations were probably terrible. I don't think I inspired that many students at that point. But what I did realize in those few visits is that there's a lot of kids that didn't have any role models at all doing anything similar to what I was, or just being positive in general, I guess, right? So, one particular group of students that I went to happened to be all Hispanic. I did not know that going to this school. I just knew I was going to talk to some students about engineering. And I go, and it ends up being this student org within the high school that focused on the Hispanic community. And during the presentation, they were a little bit on the quieter side. So I was a little concerned. But then afterwards, they all kind of came up and wanted to ask questions like in the group. They didn't want to ask it in front of everybody, but like a group of them came up and then wanted to ask more in like a intimate setting their questions they had. And through that process, kind of broke down their walls, their barriers, right? And were more open. And one of the students asked me, like, where are you from? And so I mentioned that I was Puerto Rican. And he goes, oh, that's interesting because you're the only Puerto Rican I know that's standing up. And I said, what do you mean by standing up? He said, well, I'm Puerto Rican too. And everyone in my community is involved in drugs or gangs or something negative. And so I was like, wow, I rode my bike to this school. Like I'm 1 mile away from one of the top public universities in the country. And this kid doesn't even have a single role model that looks like him, period. Not even just one in STEM, but a single positive role model, period.
Hmm.
And so that's what really opened my eyes to like how important it is for me to show up for the students. And sometimes not even just the STEM aspect of it, right? Just sometimes just showing something positive. One of the most important questions I get at some of my shows when I do my It's Not Magic, It's Science shows is not about the science. It's, can I have a hug? Right. And that the fact that that's one of the questions they can ask me when they can ask me about Ninja Warrior, they can ask me about all the crazy experiments we did, they can ask me about my college journey. The fact that, more than once, kids have took their option to ask for a question, to like ask for a hug, is like, wow, right? I know I'm doing something right if we're making that level of impact. And again, no matter who you are, no matter what part of that journey you're in, like whether it was me with my first presentation, which was probably terrible, or now with my presentations that I know are very effective and inspire lots of kids, either way, just showing up is a big step for our community.
Yeah, it is. It's seeing like yourself represented, right? I can definitely point to those mentors where where I've had that moment of like, oh my gosh, this person is where I want to be, or this person is a mirror, right? That I feel like I'm looking into, and I'm staring at myself, or again where I want to be. So I love that you get to do that, and that you're bringing a different face to that. When we were hanging out in Austin, I told you something, and I'm gonna bring it up now. So I said like, you're really shaping yourself in this like incredible way, in the way that you're engaging youth to be like the Bill Nye of like this generation. And then we corrected ourselves, which I'm glad we did, where we said like, you're not the Bill Nye of this generation, right? Like you're the Jay Flores of this generation. And there's a really, really important, like intentional message behind saying that in the way that more people get to see themselves reflected in you, right? Whether they're coming from a different background, coming from Puerto Rico, or whatever their circumstances are, it's a different connection that can be made, and so that's really important. So I do think that like you are doing work that is really important and that will resonate with people for a long time. Um, but you're not the Bill Nye of this generation. You're the Jay Flores, and that's something that I think is important to note. Um, I do think that like you are making a huge impact in this generation, and I can't wait until you're like, like featured everywhere and doing all these cool like fashion photo shoots the way Bill Nye is doing now. He's like cashing out on like the love, because it's love, right? It's the love that like our generation growing up with that personality has, because there was such a genuine desire to just like share the sciences with us, that even though we were watching him through like like these old staticky like classroom TVs, you could still feel it. And so now like I go crazy every time he's in Washington DC. I want to meet him. um and you're doing that, and that's super cool. So I'm excited to see where that continues to carry you, because I know that these kids are really deeply feeling like the impact that you're trying to make in their lives. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And it just reminds me, first of all, shout out to Bill Nye because he
Yeah.
does inspire tons of people. But yeah, we kind of refixed our statement there. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, you mentioned the staticky TV, but at least where
Yeah.
I was in school, the staticky TV was usually on this like rolling cart.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you saw that like rolling cart come in, you're like, yes, we get to watch a
Oh yeah.
movie or Bill Nye or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that reaction that people still have to this day, that like nostalgia of it is that shows the impact. Even if they didn't end up being engineers, the fact that they still remember those moments of the TV being carted in and we were going to watch Bill Nye is huge. And that's the type of long-term impact I hope to have. And I want kids to see themselves in it and to be able to go and do it. Even in the branding of our kits, which I have up here, I include
Mm-hmm.
my wife, who is also an engineer, to make sure that young girls also feel seen and represented. And that just makes a huge difference. And I have a cute story of a kid, uh, also happened to be Hispanic, but his connection point that day was that his name was Jay as well. This is a
Oh.
kindergarten student. And so the fact that he had met another Jay that was doing something cool was like really awesome to him. And he was so excited that we both had the same name, to the point where, so in all of my experiences, I make sure that I bring up the kids on stage to be part of the experiments as well. Like I want them to feel not that you're just watching a scientist that looks like them, but they are also scientists as well, and that they can explore and they can be part of it. And so when I'm grabbing the first couple volunteers for my first experiment, I grabbed 3 students for that one. I grabbed one kid on this side, one in the middle, and then I was going towards his side. And I ended up picking the little girl next to him. And he goes, what happened to the 2 J's? Like almost like we had this connection with the same name that I
Oh.
needed to pick him. And eventually I did pick him for something else. But it was just such that cute moment that he made that connection point by our names. And I know that connection point between our communities and our backgrounds and shared experiences and challenges, and both the good and the bad, are something that's going to make a connection with kids that lasts a long time, and that hopefully keeps the messages that I share with them like top of mind for them as they go through their journeys.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah. I I want to get into a section here of our conversation. You already knew going into this that we were going to talk about it. I think this is one of those things that it's just such a unique experience that like that also kind of speaks to the work that you're doing and the way that you've like pushed yourself into these spaces and just like excelled, right? We got to talk about like that expanded influence, the TV shows, the like media work that you've done. So let's start with, I think, the most like immediately recognizable, which is American Ninja Warrior. Um, competing on that show is a whole different kind of challenge, right? I don't know for any of the folks like watching that have seen the show, it's intense. There's a lot that goes into it, physical strength, right? How did you go from mechanical engineer to ninja warrior? And what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so there's so many parallels here. But I'll start with the reason why I do the show is actually science, which is weird, right? It's I do have a passion for athletics, as we mentioned from earlier. I've done sports since I was in kindergarten, and I've always been involved in something, everything from soccer to taekwondo to running in college and obstacle course racing, everything. Uh, but what it's allowed me to do is to bring science and STEM to an area that our country already celebrates, and which is showbiz and entertainment, right? So, I was trying to figure out like how do we, engage more kids, engage more students, and a lot of things that get attention in our country happen to revolve around sports and Hollywood and those kinds of things. So I was like, okay, instead of competing with that, how do I leverage that attention to bring attention to what I want my community to see, and how do I find a way to make them both as important? That didn't happen immediately. Like I actually, this is also another journey of perseverance and sticking to it, because to get on American Ninja Warrior, you have to apply. You submit a written application and also a video application, and they receive tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of applications every season. And only a few people get to have the experience. And so it took me actually the first time that I got the call that I was going to be on the show was my 10th season trying to get on the show. So I had had 9 different rejections in a wide variety of ways. Whether that was I actually applied, there was years where I tried to be a walk on, there was years where they had a lottery system for the walk on. So I tried each and every way that was possible to get on the show, and got rejected 9 times. When you get rejected 9 times, it's really hard to keep that mentality of moving forward, of continuing to train. Like the amount of training you need to do to be successful on the show is very significant. Um, because you only get one shot, right? It's like the Olympics, but worse because I mean, you get Olympics, I guess, is every 4 years, but there's other competitions in between. In this case, it's like you get one shot, but versus the Olympics, where if you're still at the top of your game, you're going to get another shot and you're likely to go back. In this case, for whatever reason, they don't want to cast you again. They don't have to cast you again, even if you're one of the best in the world, no matter how much work you put into it, because it's about the story. It's not just about your athletics on the show. And so the good thing about all of that rejection, though, is that I think I was in a much better position by the time I got the call, both from a physical standpoint, more years of training, more years where like these gyms started to actually pop up in communities so I could train more specific for the show. But most importantly, I had started to build my own brand and my business, right? And so this past season that I competed on, I was one of the featured stories. And so basically, I got like a 5-minute commercial for It's Not Magic, It's Science on, national television. And then, which is also still like streaming on one of the top streaming platforms in the world. So if it wasn't for that perseverance of pushing through, and if it, including like giving love to the rejections, because now I'm in a better spot to take advantage of. Back then I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of it as much. Um, I wouldn't have been able to do this kind of stuff. Um, and that's something that I think we all need to understand is like if you are truly passionate about something, don't let those rejections stop you from pursuing that. And then definitely don't let your own rejections, your own mental game stop you from pushing forward, because there's times where I didn't want to apply, but I was like, okay, I gotta learn something from the last application, and I gotta keep moving forward. Eventually I'll figure this thing out. And
It's
eventually
that
I did.
runner's endurance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it was on your 10th try or your 10th audition try that you made it.
Yeah, so it's a
Well,
combination because like the first couple times I tried, I didn't know that there was an application, but my brother told me that they were filming in Miami. So like I drove down and tried to be on the walk-on line, but I didn't make it through the walk-on line. And so the next year I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna sleep overnight in the park and wait, and I'm gonna be one of the first people in line for the walk-on line. And I get there and there's like 50 people there already. And so I slept overnight, did all the things and didn't get to go on anyways. And then so I'm like,
hmm
okay, this isn't working. I need to do the actual application. So I tried the application. The first one, I kind of waited till the last minute and it was terrible. The next year, I took a little bit more time, but I still hadn't figured it all out. And then each year I was trying like different stories and different combinations of like how much athleticism I show versus how much story I tell. And that kind of all helped me understand like how do I better position myself like uniquely compared to all the other tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that are applying. And it really taught me a lot about marketing and branding myself properly so I can make a bigger impact. In this case, get on the show, but in my business and everything I do with It's Not Magic, It's Science and all the other brands is like, how do I make myself, my story powerful and unique enough to grab the attention of the audiences that I want to impact?
that sounds like the scientific method to me. Um, because it is right. Like you had these tests that you were running and you were adjusting your work and your presentation accordingly until you had the right like formula for to get to that moment, right? To be on the show. And I see your videos sometimes now where you're like still training and you're like doing these like feats that I wish I could do. That are amazing, and I think the fact that like you're still incorporating some of that like into your day to day is really cool too. And obviously the platform that it then gives you to promote, like you said, like your work is incredible because it is like the intentional usage of where our attention is right now as audiences to then promote good work that is also important, that is connected, right? um, to your narrative and your story. And I think that's really, really cool. What can you tell us about Make 48 and the work with kids in that show?
Yeah, so Make 48 was my first opportunity to serve as like a host of a show, which was really cool. As a show for PBS. It's also on Roku now. You can stream it on Roku. It's like a 48-hour design challenge where teams are given like a theme and a prompt, and they have 48 hours to create a prototype and kind of compete with that. And it was just a really cool experience from the host perspective to be able to kind of like how do I, as a host, lift up the people that are doing the work, right? Like, how do I help amplify and tell their story in a cool way and showcase their like awesomeness, right? And so that transfers over to everything I want to do with kids because it allows me to help use my platform and my voice to elevate what they're doing and celebrate it in the same way we celebrate other things like their sports accomplishments or again Hollywood and movies and TV and stuff. So that was an awesome experience from that perspective to serve as that host and on a network, right? Like so PBS may not be as sexy as a Netflix or like when I did Are You Smarter Than a Celebrity on Amazon Prime, but it reaches so many households, especially households that might not be able to afford monthly subscriptions to other things. Right. And so that was also another thing that made that opportunity really attractive to me is to, how do we make sure that everybody knows that they have the opportunity to build something and create something? And the coolest thing about the show is that anyone can apply. It's like you don't have to be like an engineer or like a master craftsman to do it because what they do is they take these contestants who are families, groups of teachers, friends from whatever experience, and they surround them with what they call tool techs, which are the people that are the experts in like computer aided design or in machining or in woodworking. And so you just need to use your creativity, and then you need to just be able to communicate that to the tool techs to help you build the prototype. So
Mm.
anybody can walk in that door and they can build something awesome with that support. And I just think it's such an awesome model for how we should approach kind of like developing youth in our communities. It's like, how do we surround every child with the tool techs or mentors or teachers, whatever kind of group of people we need to make sure that they're able to do whatever it is that they want in the long term. So that was another awesome experience with a lot of learning.
I like that. I like that narrative that you're talking about, right? In like giving youth the environment and the resources to be able to like take their ideas and see them manifested, right? Even if maybe they don't have the immediate like knowledge to know how to manifest that or create or build, to have that environment. That makes me think a bit of our work, right, at Zeta, in wanting to make sure that like we are a resource and an environment where young people feel comfortable ideating, right, building thoughts around tech and tech policy and leaning on our resources and the resources of our networks to then see that manifested, right? Um, I think that's where you get like where you get that broader public engagement, even if they don't have maybe the necessary immediate knowledge or tools to impact something themselves. In the right environments, like they can make a huge difference. They can build something really innovative, right? They can have a huge impact on an issue, or something tech related in our case, right? And I think that's a hack. That's a hack for the folks that are working in these spaces because you get like a wider range of ideas, like freshness to like your work when you're able to incorporate more people that maybe don't have those immediate skills but can be brought into that space. Um, if you had to point to like two experiences on both shows, right, where you were just like, wow, like that really stood out to me, or like that was crazy, um, what would you share?
Yeah. So one during the show and then one after. So the first
Mhm.
one was Ninja Warrior. You don't get to try anything. We find out what the obstacles are that day, right? You don't get to touch anything. You don't get to go up on there and see what it's like. Um, it's it's so much more of a mental game, kind of like running example earlier, in that you get one shot, there's the cameras, everything's bigger, the lights, the audience. I brought like massive groups of friends and family because they allow us to bring them on set, and I just wanted to kind of bring as many as I could. And I brought a lot of students too, actually, to help kind of amplify their story.
Mm.
And so there's just like this crazy amount of pressure at the start. And this past season, I was actually the first runner to go. So I didn't even get to see anybody else do the course. I was the guinea pig for everything. There's two things that I think like helped me in that moment that I think people can apply to whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, especially in a space that's new to them, where you're the first, or it's just like you're growing and it's really difficult because you're out of your comfort zone. The first was that I did everything I could when we did our rock walkthrough, where they just tell you what the obstacles are and they tell you the rules and stuff, was to reverse engineer anything I could. So there's this one particular obstacle called domino effect, where you're running over these like giant dominoes, and they're on like a hinge that causes them to tilt back and forth. There's two that are one height, then the middle one is a little bit higher, and then the last two are the same height as the original two. And someone asked, like, are they all like tightened the same way, right? There's like, do some of them tilt more easily than others? And they said, no, they're all the same. But I was like, there's got to be something different about this middle one. There's got to be a reason why they're tricking us or challenging us here, aside from the fact that it's going up and down a little. And so what I realized is that that one was higher because it was pinned lower on the domino. All the dominoes were the same size. So, but if you grab the first ones, they're pinned right in the middle. So they're able to rotate back and forth slightly. The one
Mm.
that's pinned at the bottom has like a full range of motion. So it
Mm.
tilts way more than the others. Even if it like the tightness of how loose it is the same, it has a much larger range of motion. And so what I realized in that moment is that people are going to be running across. they're going to hit that one. It's going to move further than they thought. They're going to freak out. They're going to try to hit the brakes and prevent themselves from tilting. And what's going to happen is that domino is going over anyway. So you're just going to fall straight down in the water. You're killing your momentum. You're going to fall. What I realized was in that moment, when that goes through my mind, I just need to know, take another step, keep moving forward, use that momentum of that domino that's feels like it's throwing you to the ground to take one more step forward and just keep going across. And that really helped me on that obstacle. And so, like, when we're going through these challenging times, instead of like thinking about all the challenges and stuff, think about like how you can reverse that challenge before you even get there. And it's still going to be scary when you get there, but at least you put some thought into like, okay, this is how I would handle something like this. And when it gets there, I'm not going to freak out. I'm going to, move forward with that. And so that, as well as at the starting line when I was starting, it's like this roller coaster of like, what happens if I fall on this first obstacle, to like calmness and like, no, I've been prepared for this. I haven't done this exact thing, but I've done this training, and just like enjoying the moment and trusting the journey that I've gotten to get to that point. So that was like the experience during, which is crazy and it's nerve wracking, but I got to semifinals in both of my seasons. And so that was a big piece of it. The second one is after the show. So after I watched my first season, in my semi-finals episode, after I do my experiment on stage, they pan to the audience and they show the reaction of this young boy who is just like super excited, like wow, kind of mind blown to my "it's not magic, it's science" experiment. And in that moment, I realized like I won. Like I just got to be the Hispanic representation in science for that child that I never saw growing up. And so like it didn't matter what happened on the course. It didn't matter what else they showcased or how my story looked. I was like, mission accomplished, basically. And like, how do I get more of these moments? Because now for that student, I got to be the Bill Nye, as you said, or the Jay Flores for that
Oh,
kid. Um, and hopefully for many others that ended up, watching from home. So it's those things that when you stay true to your journey and to who you are and to what you want to accomplish, no matter where you are, whether that's in like you're primarily doing what you're doing or just how you show up to other things that you show up to, just always staying true to what you're passionate about.
yeah.
And no matter how many rejections are, no matter what kind of pressure or fear or, kind of outside of your comfort zone you are, just persevering through that, sticking close to your passion, like good things are going to happen.
Yeah. That's incredible. And also really insightful. I had not thought about like the nuance of the show and the way that like they engineer some of these like obstacles, and how you have to like think, I'm assuming super quickly, right? Like if you're first in line, like it's like an immediate kind of like analysis that you're going through to say like, what am I looking at and how am I adjusting? And then the emotional piece to it of like, I need to adjust this way and recognize maybe the fear or the nerves. um I can't imagine that compared to like the nerves of just like when you're about to start a race and you're like, ooh, feeling kind of pumped. That's like a whole nother level, right? But I appreciate that. I want to move us into our next section, which I think we're already kind of speaking to a little bit, and I think I know the answer to this, because you touched on it so beautifully just now. But transitioning into the entrepreneurship work, creating Invent the Change. In 2021, you founded Invent the Change, an initiative designed to make STEM more fun and interactive for kids. What inspired you to start that? I think we've already heard some incredible stories about the way that you see, these kids react when you're able to either be a model that you didn't get to see as a kid, but or just like the sheer like excitement around like something that you may be demonstrating or showing them, as a part of like the presentation of the different like exercises that you go through in your work. But in your own words, what was the reason for starting Invent the Change?
Yeah, and I think something you said just now, right before that, is kind of going to be the trigger for how I answer this. And you said kind of you had to go first. And when you said that, it just made me think I'm the oldest sibling. I'm also the oldest cousin on both sides of the family. So in addition to being the first engineer, I'm going to be the first in this generation, at least, to kind of pave the way for this next group taking the baton from my parents and tios and tias and my grandparents, whatever, and like how do I set the stage for my sister and for my cousins to make sure that we all are taking this to the next level. And so that's what everything originally started with. It started with
Mm.
just trying to be the best possible role model I could for my sister and my primos. A lot of my cousins grew up in either single mother or divorced households. So not all of them had that same two parent experience that I did. Um, and so I wanted to be that as much as I could for them, that positive male role model for them. And as I started my work with Ship, and as I started working on, my professional career and the volunteerism, and then eventually becoming an entrepreneur and building what I did, what this is all about is expanding that impact from just my sister and my primos to my entire familia, being, the entire Hispanic community, and just anyone in the world, any kid in the world that wants to make a difference and be able to invent the change that they want to see in the world. So that's where I got the phrase. It's a play on Gandhi's "Be the Change," right? I feel that being the change is very important. We need to kind of be good people in general. But if you can invent the change you want to see in the world, that's going to have a potentially much wider spread reach, and live potentially beyond your life, right? Because you're creating something that is making a difference that can then last forever, right? So I want to make sure that all kids have at least the exposure and then hopefully the resources uh, to explore that interest in inventing the change that they personally want to see in the world. And that
Yeah.
can manifest itself in a wide variety of ways, right? Every child that I talk to is going to be passionate about different things. But one of my favorite examples is at one of my shows, I was doing with a lot of my experiments, I try to bring them then to like, what's the real world application of this? Like, how do we take this crazy experiment that you first thought was magic and now you found out is actually science? How do we apply that to the world? Or how's it being used already? Or how could you, as a young person, use it in the future as you develop your engineering skills and potentially create something? And so
Mm.
that day we were talking about some real life applications of the Iron Man suit, and this student says, I was asking them what they would want to do. And he says, I want one for my grandmother. And at first I was like, should we tell Abuela that he wants to strap a rocket suit to her? Like, but I'm like, okay, why do you want an Iron Man suit for your abuela? Most kids like want their own jetpacks or they want their own Iron Man suit. Why do you want one for your abuela? And he goes, well, my abuela can't really move around that much anymore. So we can't play like we used to outside. And so, as a 6 year old, this child is telling me I want to strap a rocket suit to my abuela. But as a future engineer and innovator, what he was telling me is I want to make the world a better place by creating mobility solutions for people that are elderly, disabled, or have any other types of challenges moving around.
Mm.
And so most of the time, the world says, that's crazy. Don't strap rockets to your abuela. But instead, if we nurture and empower that kind of initial curiosity and kind of like inner innovation within the child in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on their age, the world might be a better place. And when you and I are older and we can't run anymore, we'll be running around in Iron Man suits instead. So that's kind of what it is. It's for those kids that have curious ideas and don't yet have the skills to bring them to life. I want them all to keep that inner curiosity strong as they grow. And I want them to have more and more fun, exciting, educational, accessible, equitable experiences that allow them to go down that path.
Yeah. I I love that story. Thank you for sharing. And I think one of the reasons it stands out is because there's like this dreaming that kids do, right? Like kids see problems. I think sometimes much more easily than we do because they're just always imagining and they're constantly discovering the world, right? And it reminds me of a story that I like to share. I have some of the like the wearable tech glasses that have like the AI integration, and they're very subtle. But one of my favorite stories about those glasses in particular is that one of the one of the leaders that worked on those glasses, it's the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. One of the leaders, one of the engineers that worked on that project, his mother is blind, and he grew up with his mom being blind. And so, as he was working on this, like this wearable tech, one of his priorities that just was an inspiration to him and wanting to get involved in that kind of work was making sure that these glasses met a need that his mom had. And so my favorite story to share about the glasses is, they have a lot of real world application for folks that are visually impaired, from like reading your mail to telling you what color your shoes are if you're trying to coordinate an outfit, to like telling you what's in front of you if you're trying to get a sense of your surroundings in real time. And that is a great example as well, like the one that you're sharing, hopefully one day, of how like kids can take these like dreams and visions and use them as fuel to push them as learners forward into really making like crazy impact in the world. And a part of the story there with like these glasses now having the capability to like read someone's mail for them, right? You hold it up and you say, hey, can you look at this and tell me what this says? It gives that person independence that they didn't have beforehand, where they would have maybe potentially had to hire somebody or have somebody else come in to like comb through their mail. Now they have that independence, and that is the kind of dreaming we need. Like we need kids to say like, yeah, my I want to solve this problem. Like I miss playing with my abuela. Like that's like really impactful, right? On an emotional level. And I think that these are the kinds of things we need to continue to cultivate in kids. And so that inspiration behind building out Invent the Change, I think, is a beautiful story. Um, your brand has grown and then like branched into these different areas of work. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Invent the Change is kind of like the umbrella organization, I'd say overall. And within that, there's a wide variety of things that I do. I think the biggest and what I'm most passionate about, what has probably the biggest impact, is my brand is not magic, it's science, which I've mentioned a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
So that started as just on TikTok during the pandemic, when I knew our kids weren't going to have the same access to entertaining science experiences that are also educational. I just downloaded TikTok and started creating some experiments that happened to appear kind of magical, right? So I did a bunch of research on all different kinds of things, but the most important part was that they were things that could be done at home with resources that kids already potentially had or could order for a very low cost. And if the cool thing about it is like I was able to find a good amount of things to the point where, like, the experiment I did on last season of Ninja Warrior. Wait, so again, this is prime time television. I was the first runner, so it was the first thing that came on that episode is my experiment. And I got all the materials pretty much from the dollar store to do that experiment that was good enough and flashy enough for primetime American Ninja Warrior. The only thing I didn't get from Amazon was something that I wanted in a specific like quantity. Or sorry, from the dollar store was something I wanted in a specific quantity, but kids could do the same exact experiment at home, and all they'd have to do is go to a Walmart or Amazon or dollar store at a very low cost. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a game changer in just like equitable STEM experiences that are just like as entertaining as they are educational, right? So like really removing all those barriers, but from the beginning, not creating something that's awesome and then figuring out, well, how do we make sure that the kids that can't afford this experience can be part of it, right? Like, why don't we just
Yeah.
create things from the beginning that are as accessible as possible? You can't remove every single barrier, but let's remove as many of them as we can at the beginning instead of trying to figure it out later.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're actually widening the gap because you're providing some awesome experience for kids that cannot, the only the kids that can afford it or have the connections or the experiences. So that's been a big part of it. It started with just the social media videos. Now it's I have my physical kit, which has the materials they need to do some of the experiments. I do a live tour, so we go to communities, to conferences like South by Southwest EDU, to schools, gymnasiums, cafeterias, etc. And I get corporate sponsors to provide the kit for all of the students that attend, so that they can go home and be part of it as well, and they can be the scientists. And one of the cool things about how I set it up with magic is that once you learn a trick, you don't keep that to yourself. So I've almost built in a ripple effect, because every kid's now going to want to show that magic trick, which is actually a science trick,
Yeah.
to their friends, their family, their abuelas and abuelos when they come visit. And it builds their STEM identity, and also kind of spreads the coolness of it all.
Yeah.
So that's like the biggest area. But then I also have like a lot of partnerships, for example, with Discovery Education. I'm one of their mystery science guides, which is an awesome program designed for K to fifth graders. And it's the most widely used science resource in the country for K to fifth grade. So I'm bringing Hispanic representation, actually in both English and Spanish, to millions of kids every month. And that's been one of the most rewarding, because it's actually one of the things I get most recognized for, even more than Ninja Warrior or Are You Smarter Than a Celebrity, like the shows that I've done. I get more kids and teachers that are like, oh, you're Jay from Mystery Science. And, I'll do, photos with them. Or if it's a teacher, I'll do a little selfie video, like shouting out to their classroom. So I really try to kind of bring that to life, right? Like, hey, yeah, this is a real person. Hispanic, speaks English and Spanish, and is teaching science to kids all over the country. What I'm really excited for is when those kids become old enough for social media, that might have that Bill Nye effect that you were saying. We're like, oh, I remember when I
Yeah.
was in third grade and I used to watch your videos. Now I'm in high school, or now I'm in
Yeah.
college, and now I'm following you on whatever social media platform will exist then. So
Yeah.
there's others, but those are like the partnerships, right? And then I do a lot of like keynotes at conferences, whether that be directed towards students or educators, industry leaders, corporations, etc. So that's, I guess, would be like the third piece, is just those kind of like conferences and events, keynote speeches that work either with just the kids or those that want to reach more students and be more effective in how they spread STEM.
The broader network of work is really interesting because you're touching so many different aspects of like education, engaging youth, and there's like a cultural feeling, right? Like that we were talking about, right? The teacher rolls in the TV, it's staticky, like they put in like the big like what is it, VHS tape? Is that what it's called? Yeah. They put it in, like Bill Nye comes on, it's a little bit kind of old looking. And even though it's like not the highest quality, it's not the flashiest, it it created a cultural moment for us, right? Like in our educations. And that only grows because it's moving to kids, right? And so the fact that like you are interacting with folks in so many different avenues is incredible because like we see that in entertainment all the time, right? Where like somebody grows up. I'll use the example. I love her. One of the actresses from Abbott Elementary, right? Um, who played Jessie on The Parent Trap. We grew up with her. I don't know. I grew up with that movie, and so you there's a persona that you grew up with. The same with like Lindsay Lohan, right? Like we grew up with her as a child star. We love her, and then maybe like they go and they do their own thing for a while, but then as adults we're like, hey, where is this person that I like, that is a core part of my childhood experience? Where are they? What are they doing? I want to support it. And now like both of those actresses, right? Lindsay Lohan, and then I don't know her name off the top of my head, but I love her, and she dresses amazing on all the red carpets now. Um, they're killing it, and the following is there. People remember them, remember the impact they had like on their lives watching their like movies and their shows, and there's like a following. It's a cult following. Bill Nye has a cult following, and I'm excited for you to have one too. Like as we continue to grow and see these youth that you're engaging grow up and say, yeah, I remember Jay. Like Jay is the reason I'm doing this, right? Like Jay is the reason I'm working at NASA. Like that, those stories are coming your way. I hope you're prepared for that.
I actually just had one, if you don't mind me sharing that
Yeah, of
story. Like,
course.
so I was recently at the National STEM Festival in DC,
Hmm.
and they bring in students. It's kind of like think of like a national science fair, right? So there's a
Hmm.
couple kids from every state and also some US territories
Hmm.
that come in and they get to showcase their kind of science fair type innovation. And it's awesome. They celebrate them, they give them opportunities to learn from about like patents and um, trademarks and all the other resources they need to keep their ideas going. And they also had these mentor sessions. And so I got to be one of the mentors for the mentor session, and they come in small groups and we get to have closer discussions about what's going on. And these students are in high school. So this is not who I would have thought has already gone through some of my programs. But there was a girl who was from one of the US territories. I don't even remember the name. It's like Northern something islands. It starts with an M. Um, just like crazy far away, very remote, small island, not a lot of resources. Like she's mentioning, there's not even a science museum or anything for her to look to things. But when it was her turn to ask questions, she's like, I want to direct my question at Jay because I feel like I like starstruck or something like that. She said, because like you're who taught me science. Like we don't have any
Mm,
resource. We have like one science teacher for the whole school, but we found these videos that you share, and it's me and the other mystery science guys. It's not just me, but like that connection to someone from a place that
yeah.
I can't even remember
Yeah.
the name, right? How far she
On
was
the other
away.
side of the planet. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, like probably as far within the US territories as you can go.
Yeah.
And we're meeting in DC, and just to be able to like celebrate that with her and then make the little video for the students that she's working with because she's trying so hard to make an impact with such little resources. So it's like you never know in this world of YouTube and social media, like
Hmm.
how many people you can impact that I would have never known, if I wouldn't have showed up for that event and been in that particular what do you call it, mentor session group.
Yeah.
So I think it's happening, right? And I can't wait, yeah, for it to
Yeah.
continue to keep going because that means that there's more of those kids just like her that are trying to pay it forward and inspire other kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're killing me because I don't think I've ever had to work this actively to keep back tears during a podcast. Because these stories are so moving, right? Like we're seeing that impact. Um, and there's something there, like also in these like stories that we're sharing, which is the word legacy, right? The legacy that we leave, and I think it's Maya Angelou that like has like a phrase around like the legacy. Your legacy is not like the actions actually that you take in life. It's the people, whether you meet them or not, like the all of the people that you touch for better, like in this world while you're here. So talk about legacy work, right? I mean, it's incredible. All of this is beautiful, and I love the fact that you're willing to share all of this with us. But the entrepreneur in me, right, and like the business leader in me is thinking about how difficult it is to run a business, especially a business so multifaceted like yours. And so, what are some of the challenges that you would say like you have encountered in building all of this work up?
Yeah. So it's even getting hard to like introduce myself because like what do I start with? Do I talk about Ninja Warrior? Do I talk about my mechanical engineering degree? Are you smarter than a celebrity? This, that, like Discovery Education. That's a huge brand and partnership where I think is where I actually reach the most kids versus it's not magic science. Like it's a lot of stuff. Um, but I think the hardest part for most people, and I feel like I was pretty good at avoiding this early on, is putting yourself in a position to make sure that you can always stay true to what you're passionate about and what your true mission and vision is from the beginning, right? So when I was getting ready to take the jump from the corporate world, right, working for an engineering organization to then going off on my own, um, I made sure that I had set up some solid savings, and I had the conversations with my wife and like had a game plan, and actually had a couple kind of, I guess, gigs set up prior to actually making the jump, so that I wouldn't have to be scrambling just to take whatever deal or opportunity came around, right? I wanted to make sure that I was set for a couple months so I could kind of establish myself and do the work in the way that I truly wanted to do it, and have the impact that I want. Because the more you do stuff like that, that's genuine, that's tied and very aligned to what you love, one, it makes it so much easier for you to do when you're handling all the crazy stuff that happens within entrepreneurship, when you're wearing every single hat and you're trying to figure out how to make this all work, and um, without having any previous experience or that many mentors that have done things like this. So it allows you to kind of stay focused on that. But then also, people then start to see you as that brand, and they start to come to you for those types of opportunities that are aligned to your mission and your vision, and it just continues to grow in a way that is not as overwhelming if you are trying to be something you're not, right? So even though I have a lot of things that seem to be in different spaces, they're all very tied to every, the kind of core things that I'm about, which is like, family, which extends to community, it's science, and it's athletics, right? So it's like those are my kind of three areas that I love to be. I love being around my family and my community. I love sharing science, and I enjoy staying active. And so when I can put all those things together, and it happens to lead to science on TV while doing an obstacle course, like that
Yeah.
just is that perfect storm that happened because I stayed true to everything that I wanted to do. The
Yeah.
other thing is something I learned early in my engineering degree, because I mean, I did very well in high school. I was valedictorian at my school, but then engineering was a lot harder than high school was. And so early on, I had to realize like I needed to swallow my ego and like get help, right? Like go to tutoring, even if I didn't think I needed it, or even if I thought it was embarrassing or a sign of weakness, whatever. I was like, I need to get all the help I can get, surround myself with mentors, with resources, like really surround yourself with excellence, build a team around you as early as possible, but especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, and understand like what your strengths and weaknesses are so that you can focus on what's going to drive your business forward, and get support in the things that either you aren't as good at or that you don't enjoy, so that you can keep building. So like my next
Yeah.
thing right now is I'm writing a bilingual STEM children's book that's coming
Wow.
out this summer, and that's one that was like I chose engineering because I didn't want to write another essay, right? So like this is not my strong point, but it was something that aligned very closely to what I want to do, and it's allowing me to go to younger. Like I'm targeting 0 to 7 years old for this one.
Mm.
And so I made sure, like I had to hire an illustrator, and I had to work with people to help review my manuscript and stuff. And those are all things I had never done before, but I'm surrounding myself with a strong enough team and support system to be able to have success there and have impact on something that would have been crazy to build on my own. And that's
Yeah.
how I do all these things, right? Between my
Yeah.
own brands and the partnerships, it's all about surrounding myself with that excellent team.
You, I think you're kind of answering the next question as well, which is, it was, how do you stay motivated? And it sounds like for you, right? Like you've stayed motivated by one, having a strong sense of purpose and orientation at the very beginning that allows for like some flexibility in like taking on what comes at you or what you want to like, what stands out to you as an opportunity to fulfill that purpose. There's a flexibility there, but it's like the orientation and the purpose keeps you going, right? Is that pretty fair to say?
Yeah, I think if you really look at the people that are successful and happy, and I don't mean just rich, because you could be rich and you could be miserable, right? I mean success, whatever level of wealth that means for you, but more connected to also the same level of happiness, is the people that never give up on their passion and keep persisting and moving forward in the things that are closest to their heart, right? And so, yeah, like there are times where it's very difficult, but because I'm like, I use the phrase, I'm drowning in things that I love. Right? So it's like, imagine like a dog that's
Yeah.
just like drowning in tennis balls, right? They love playing with tennis
Yeah.
balls and there's this all over the place and everything's crazy, but they're so happy because they're around the thing that they love. They're having the
Yeah.
impact that they want. And so as long as you're moving forward in that space, no matter what level of the journey you're on, it's harder at the beginning because you don't see the success and the
Hmm.
accolades and stuff for a long time. But as long as you're moving in your passion and you're making progress and you're growing, like also like feeling progress is important. Progress is more important than perfection is kind of what I'm trying to get at. Is just making sure that
Hmm.
you keep moving forward, you keep growing. The first version of the kit was not that special, right? It's better now. Just like my presentations at the beginning were not that good. Now I've got, second to sixth graders going crazy and so excited and loving it. But just doing that um, is is really important to make sure that you're going to persist when things are more difficult. And then the other big thing is just making sure that as you're going through that journey, you're making sure you're getting out into your community. And what I mean by that is like the people that you're trying to serve. So sometimes, especially with remote work, like when I'm not out at events, sometimes things get like a little bit more challenging or frustrating and it seems more difficult. But then I go out to an event and I have one of those experiences with the kids or like the girl I was telling you that told me about the impact, right? When you're creating and you're building these things and it takes so much work and so much effort, you don't always get that kind of feedback. But like make sure you're going back out into the community you're trying to impact so that you do get kind of like that reinvigoration of okay, this is the impact I'm having. And even if you don't get a special message like I did that time, you still remind yourself of the need and the importance of the work you're doing. It's not always fun to see the challenges our communities are facing, but it's almost I've had this I guess phenomenon I'll call it where I'll cry, but then I'll smile, if that makes sense. And the reason that happens is because it sucks that our community is in a certain position, but I'm happy that I'm part of the solution. And that just gives me so much purpose to the point where like that sadness and that tear turns into like an energy and a happiness that like, but I'm here. I'm doing something about it.
I think there's something really moving about that because I some of my mentors that I feel really, really fortunate to have are folks that I was speaking about recently, and so it's kind of top of mind. One of them marched with Dr. King. He was a high school and college organizer during the civil rights movement and was featured not that long ago in one of the new memorials in the Northeast that they built to commemorate Dr. King and his wife. Um, and one of the things that I've learned from him, his name is Alex, um, is that we never really know when we're a part of history, right? Or when we're doing something that is changing people in ways that we can't even fathom in the moment. But I do think that sometimes there is this like spirit that comes over you or this like emotion that comes over you when you realize that, yeah, there is a problem, like something sucks, but also you are like filled with that like historical energy of being a part of the solution. And that is really moving. I think that is like one of the most beautiful feelings you can feel in life, to recognize that like you're a part of something that is having an impact and making a difference. So I do know what you mean. It is a weird feeling to describe, but yeah, like that is a beautiful feeling. And I get asked the question sometimes, like, how are you like keeping up with building Zeta as an organization? And one, I have an amazing team. Like I have a team of people that like make sure that I'm okay every day and are doing a lot every day behind the scenes. Um, and but two, it's also that's a big part. But two, it's on a personal level. The work never feels like work. The work is every day I wake up and it's that passion and drive to want to make sure that you are a part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that's really fortunate for folks that can find that in their lives and continue to follow that purpose. It's what life's all about, which I think is a huge takeaway from the conversation, and certainly from like the way that you've built out your career and the work that you're doing. I'm gonna start to kind of close this out here a little bit, Jay. But I have a question, a forward-looking question, which is what's next? Like, what do you see your work being in 5 years from now? Let's go five. I don't want to, go farther than that because I also don't want to like put any limitations on the dreams we're building out for ourselves. But in 5 years' time, like, what is the vision for the way that you're engaging with young folks all over in this work?
So I want to answer this in the frame of like what I'm starting this year that I hope will have like a widespread influence within the next 5 years, if that makes sense. And
Mm-hmm.
that's with the book, right? So the book I'm writing is it's like a picture book, right? So it's a lot really about the illustration. So I got to give a shout out to my illustrator for all the awesome work she's doing. But what it does is it takes 10 different engineering disciplines and it explains it in a way that, like, a kindergartner would understand. We take a career or a character that they might know. So it could be like a doctor or a detective or a superhero or a wizard, right? And we draw that kind of analogy to the engineering discipline and then explain what the engineering discipline does. So it roots them in something that they understand, and then it tells you what then the engineer does in that space. um, and the inspiration behind this book goes back to the little version of myself that had all the curiosity, all the creativity, but just didn't know what any of this stuff actually was. And there's this picture of myself that I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate in the book. um, when I was around, I don't know, maybe 2 years old, and I'm in this box, and I just have like the biggest smile and curiosity looking like face. It's just you could tell that that box was not a box to me. It was a race car or a rocket ship or some kind of cool thing, right? And you could just tell that my curiosity was being built there. So this book is for all of those kids that are playing in that box to then now know what they're experiencing and what they love about that box is actually a type of engineering. And this is what they do in the real world. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of figuring out what engineering is as a high schooler or, beyond, I want our community at the very youngest ages to understand that this is a possibility for them. And if their thing is playing in boxes, or if their thing is messing around in the kitchen and doing a little soap bubble experiment, whatever it is that we kind of showcase with the images in the book, is going to like put a future to their childhood passion, if that makes sense, right? So I feel that if I can do this well, and I can take this into communities over the next 5 years at that age group, we can make a significant shift in our community's ability to meet the needs that the nation has in the STEM space. Because instead of waiting until high school when you're already probably behind, if you haven't already had an interest in it, and they could have had all those years of building their science and math kind of strength, because of this initial inspiration. And because our community has such a high percentage of the population in that K to second grade range,
Mm-hmm.
it's not only going to make an impact on the Hispanic community, but it's going to make an impact hopefully on the country and the globe. So what I want is, as I'm building this out, I have a vision for kind of like our book launch events where we'll do a book reading just like any other author does, and we might have like a book signing or whatever there is there. But not only do the kids get to hear the story of these different types of engineers, we'll have engineers from the local community also there, with like tables or experiments or something to do. So the kids get to read about it. They get to meet me, the author, someone that looks like them, that read to them in English and Spanish. And then they get to go and meet the types of engineers that they were most interested in from the book, so that they
Mm-hmm.
have that local role model that hopefully looks like them. But at the very least, is from the same community as them.
Yeah.
And so if I can get this into as many different communities and spaces as possible, I mean, there's only so many I can do as an individual, but people can replicate the same model and use the book as the resource to do that. We can really kind of plant a lot of seeds for our community in this space. And some will end up growing up to be engineers and others won't, but at least they will all have had the access and the opportunity to explore it a little further.
I'm going to take a second here. I think it's really important. You and I talked about this actually as a part of, why we wanted to make sure we were having this conversation. I want to take a second to like speak to policymakers, folks shaping policy, industry leaders who I know I've been in the room where we're having these conversations are concerned that we are, as a country, we are facing multiple different worker shortages as we're continuing to move into the digital world. Across various industries in the United States, we are facing shortages of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of workers. And a lot of that shortage intersects with STEM. And there is a narrative that is so important to dispel, which is that we don't have the youth that can be inspired to meet the moment. Our youth have so much potential. And I think you prove that every single day that you're engaging our youth and witnessing their excitement around this work. I think it's so important to speak to these folks that are leading policy, leading industry, and raising alarms every day that we're not meeting the moment enough and that we don't have the skills or the qualifications within our future workforce domestically to meet that moment. We do. We do. We just need to invest in it. We need to invest in programs and leaders like you to make sure that our youth are being motivated and inspired enough to move into this space, into these spaces, because it's many industries that are facing these shortages. But that needs to be a coordinated effort, and there needs to be a strong understanding that our youth are inspired, right, by this work. We just need to make that more evident to some of these folks that are scratching their heads and wondering, like, where are we going to get this workforce from? I think that's such an important thing to raise in this conversation, and certainly something that we will continue to bring up to folks in Washington, D.C., industry leaders across the country as we have these conversations and as we're a part of those conversations around how are we meeting that moment, because we want these opportunities for our youth of all backgrounds, right? All of our youth should have the opportunity to make a better life for themselves and for their families by looking at these, STEM fields as well. This has been probably one of the best conversations I've ever had, Jay. Thank you so much for making the time. And I'm going to close this out with our signature closeout question, which is, what is your current favorite tech tool or product and why?
Current favorite tech tool or product? Um, I'm gonna go with a program, I guess, actually,
Hmm?
like an organization. It's called First. So it's a youth robotics organization. It starts as young as 4 years old. They're using Lego to build things. And then they start, as they get a little bit older, they start using Lego that move, like have motors, and they end up starting to build robots that do things that a 10-year-old is doing things that I didn't start until, I started my career. And then as they get older and older, like in middle school, they start to use more of like a fabricated robot, with aluminum and programmed by a phone. And then at the highest level in high school, they've got like 100+ pound robot that's semi-autonomous and does all these absolutely incredible things. And it's like the thing I love most about First is that it celebrates the kids in the way that we celebrate athletes and superstars and stuff, right? So they really highlight them, and it's a sport in which every kid can go pro. And so I think the most important part overall is that we need the world needs more kids that want to put their grandmas in Iron Man suits.
Yeah.
And the more fun tech experiences that we have for them in these spaces, the better off we're going to be. And I hope that the policymakers that you just spoke to that are listening in will be willing to make those long-term investments, because just like learning a new language, we need to start early, right? The earlier,
Yeah.
the better results we're going to have. And if you're willing to wait for that long-term ROI, we can make a big difference. And I think the biggest part is you mentioned the job shortage. Those are things we know are going to be an issue, but there's so many things that we're missing out on that we don't even know because these students haven't had the opportunity to exercise their innovation and their curiosity. And so my biggest fear is that the cure to cancer is trapped in the mind of a girl who was told that STEM is for boys, or in a kid who was just born in the wrong area code, or whose parents were born in a different country. And we need to make sure that all kids, as you mentioned, have these opportunities, because that's where the best innovation is going to come from.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, still holding back the tears. Yeah, that's so true. And so well said, Jay. Thank you again so much for making the time to talk to me today. This has been, again, an incredible conversation. We're going to link all of your information here below for folks to check out all of your amazing work, all of the things to come. Make sure that we share out the book launch once that comes. I know I will be ordering that book for all of my nieces and nephews. So we will make sure that we're sharing all of that information out with all of the folks watching. And to anybody watching, thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, like, follow, make sure you're checking out our bi-weekly launches as we roll out our first season of Tech Pathways. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, and thank you for everyone listening.